The moment veteran Raymond Cole stepped out of his truck, he felt it. That kind of silence that shouldn't exist. The air was still, too still. Even the wind held its breath. Beside him, Max, his canine partner, stopped mid-step. Ears up, muscles locked. His low growl rolled through the fog like a warning from something older than fear. Raymond frowned. "Easy, boy. What is it?" Max didn't move. Then, without a sound, he lunged toward the trees, dragging the leash from Raymond's hand. The forest answered with a single sound. A cry. Thin. Human. Terrified. By the time Raymond reached the clearing, he froze. A little boy, no more than 4, was tied to the train tracks, ropes cutting into his skin, eyes wide with terror. And down the line, a whistle screamed through the valley. The train was already coming. They say instincts never lie. That day, his did more than save a child. They uncovered something buried far deeper than rails and rust. Because under those tracks, beneath the quiet town of Red Hollow, something was waiting. Something built on secrets, fear, and lives no one was supposed to find. Before we begin, take a breath. Hit like, share, and subscribe if you believe mercy still has a place in this world. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I want to see how far this story travels. Morning came quietly to Red Hollow. The mist moved low and slow, curling around the old freight yard like breath over a sleeping wound. The sky was the color of tin, flat, unpromising, indifferent. You could almost hear the cold settling on the rails, the faint tick of metal expanding under the first stretch of light. The town beyond was still half asleep, its windows dull, its chimneys thinly smoking. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then silence again. The kind of silence that reminded Raymond Cole of the places he once patrolled in war, where stillness meant something was about to break. He was 55 now, his shoulders broad but slightly stooped, his step steady though marked with the faint drag of old pain. The years had carved his face into something the world rarely questions, lines that spoke of storms weathered and orders obeyed. He adjusted the collar of his worn flannel jacket and breathed through the ache in his chest that never quite left him. Beside him, the steady rhythm of paws on gravel grounded his thoughts. Max, his canine partner, moved with a soldier's discipline and a creature's grace. The German shepherd's coat caught the weak sunlight, a sable sheen rippling with each stride, breath puffing white into the crisp air. They had walked this route 100 times. The old rail yard, the rusting containers, the trail that curved toward the pine belt. A routine patrol, if such a word still meant anything in a town where most people preferred not to look too closely at what was falling apart. But today, something was different. Raymond felt it before he understood it, a pressure behind his ribs, the quiet hum of dread. Max stopped, just like that. Ears up, tail stiff. The dog's body transformed into a statue of focus. Raymond paused, following the line of that pointed nose toward the mist. "What is it, boy?" he muttered, though he already knew this wasn't one of those false alarms, the kind born from raccoons or stray cats. This was instinct, primal, true. The sound came next. Not a shout, not a cry for help. Just a small, broken sob carried on the wind. A child's sob, thin enough to almost be imagined. But Max heard it too. He jerked forward, leash straining against Raymond's hand, pulling with a force that spoke not of curiosity but of urgency. Raymond followed, his boots crunching over frost-bitten gravel, his breath catching in rhythm with the dog's. The mist thickened, swallowing the tracks, turning the world into shades of gray and sound. Somewhere ahead, a crow screamed and flew off, startled by what neither of them could yet see. Then came the whistle, distant, rising. Raymond's heart stuttered. He knew that sound, the warning wail of a freight engine breaking through the valley. He looked up just as Max darted into the clearing beyond the yard, and there, against the steel gray of the world, something small and trembling appeared at the heart of the rails. A boy. He couldn't have been older than 4. Small frame. Hair matted and dark with dirt. A red flannel shirt too large for his body. Sleeves torn and stiff with cold. His wrists were bound tightly behind him, rope cutting into tender skin already marked by bruises. His ankles were tied as well. He sat on the track, rocking, crying, lips moving soundlessly, as if whispering a prayer too small for the wind to carry. For a heartbeat, Raymond froze. The human mind does that sometimes. It tries to make sense of the impossible before the body reacts. Then everything inside him erupted into motion. He ran. Max barked furiously, circling the boy, body rigid, eyes locked on the curve of the track where the sound of the train was growing. A metallic thunder rolling closer, closer. Raymond dropped to his knees, his breath forming clouds that shattered in front of him. His knife was already in his hand, blade flashing dull silver as he slashed at the ropes. They were thick, wet, and stubborn. The boy whimpered, thrashing weakly, eyes wide with terror. "Hold on," Raymond murmured, voice low but urgent. "We've got you. You hear me? We've got you." The first rope snapped, then another. He could feel the tremor under his knees now, the rail humming with the vibration of approaching death. Max barked again, louder, more frantic, as if he could hold the train back by sheer force of will. The last knot gave way. Raymond didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed the boy, lifted him against his chest, and threw himself backward off the tracks. A second later, the train roared past, a storm of sound and steel tearing through the fog. The blast of wind struck them like a wall, lifting gravel, stinging skin. Raymond curled around the boy, shielding him, feeling the thunder roll over them, through them, into the ground. Then, silence. The kind that feels like the earth itself is exhaling. Raymond opened his eyes slowly. His hands were still shaking. The boy lay against his chest, sobbing softly, breath hitching. His skin was cold, the scent of fear sharp as metal. Max stood beside them, chest heaving, fur bristled, eyes scanning the horizon where the train had vanished. The dog's ears flicked once, then flattened. He let out a low growl, not the kind of noise a dog makes at shadows, but the kind that means something is still wrong. Raymond looked around. The ground was disturbed, grass flattened, footprints half buried in mud, too large to belong to the boy. Whoever tied him here had stood close enough to watch. He exhaled through clenched teeth, forcing his pulse to slow. "It's okay," he murmured, though it wasn't. Not yet. The boy's small fingers clung to his sleeve like roots in a storm. Max moved a few steps toward the tree line, nose low, tail stiff. He was tracking something, invisible to the human eye, but alive in scent and sound. Raymond rose slowly, lifting the boy into his arms, following Max's line of sight. The mist seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm, as if the forest itself were breathing, hiding, waiting. For a moment, the veteran stood there, framed between rails and pines, holding a child who should never have known such terror, listening to the echoes of a train fading into distance. He had saved a life today. That much was certain. But as Max's growl deepened, something else became clear too. This rescue had come far too easily. Something, or someone, had wanted them to find the boy. And that thought, quiet as it was, settled in Raymond's mind like a seed of dread that would not stop growing. The air was heavy now, thick with the strange quiet that follows a storm too sudden to understand. Raymond crouched beside the boy, his knees sinking into the cold mud, breath still unsteady from the rescue. The child's name came out only after a long moment. Samuel, 4 years old, voice thin like wind through pine needles. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes, wide, glassy gray, carried a fear that didn't belong to a child. Raymond had seen eyes like that before, in soldiers who'd come back from places they couldn't name. Samuel's small hands clutched Max's fur with a desperate strength, knuckles white against the dog's sable coat. He didn't cry anymore. He just stared at the ground, shoulders trembling, as if every sound around them might be the one that returned to take him away. Raymond reached into his pack, pulled out a canteen, and offered it gently. "Here," he said, keeping his voice low, calm, human. But the boy didn't move until Max leaned closer, pressing his warm muzzle against Samuel's arm. Then finally, he reached out, tiny fingers trembling, and drank. The water spilled down his chin. Raymond took off his jacket and wrapped it around him. The coat hung heavy, swallowing the boy's small frame, but it seemed to help. Still, every time the wind moved through the trees, the boy shuddered. The sound, that hollow moan of branches, made him flinch, head snapping toward the forest line, like prey scenting a predator. Raymond didn't push. Silence, he'd learned, could heal better than words. He waited. The forest waited too. Even the rails behind them seemed to hum quietly, carrying away the echoes of the train that had almost claimed them. Then, at last, Samuel whispered, a voice so faint it might have been imagination. He said the train would take me away forever. Raymond froze, pulse tightening. His voice, when it came, was soft but steady. "Who, son?" Samuel lifted one small hand and pointed toward the pines. His finger quivered in the air, not from cold, but something deeper. "The man with the black coat." Max's body stiffened instantly. Ears high, tail low, his growl rose from deep in his chest. A low, ancient vibration that made the forest seem to hold its breath. Raymond turned, scanning the tree line. The mist shifted but showed nothing. No footsteps, no movement. Just trees swaying under the wind, too calm to trust. His instincts whispered louder than his logic. Whoever had done this wasn't gone. They were watching, maybe from behind those trees, maybe farther. Raymond's hand brushed against the radio clipped to his vest. He pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I have a child, approximately 4 years old, male, rescued from..." Static cut through the air, sharp and violent. The signal broke into garbled noise. He adjusted the frequency. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Nothing. Only the hiss of interference, like breathing through metal. Max barked once, quick and sharp. Raymond stopped. Somewhere between the trees and the rails came a faint metallic sound. Zip, short, clean, familiar. The sound of something being closed, packed away. Raymond's pulse thudded in his ears. He rose, one hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. "Stay here," he said quietly. But Max was already moving, muscles tensing, body lowering into a silent run. The German shepherd darted forward through the fog, paws barely touching the ground. Raymond followed, careful, alert, every sense sharpened to the rhythm of danger. The sound led them beyond the tracks, into a patch of overgrown brush and twisted metal. Old rail debris, beams, rusted bolts, fragments of forgotten machines, lay scattered across the dirt. Max stopped abruptly, nose pressed to the ground, tail flicking once. His ears turned back toward Raymond, eyes glinting in the dim light. Raymond approached slowly. The air smelled of iron, wet earth, and something else. Electrical, sharp, wrong. Then he saw it. Beneath a pile of beams, half hidden under dead leaves and grime, was a small black duffel bag. He crouched. The zipper was slightly open, and through the narrow slit, he caught the glint of something metallic. A thin wire looped around a small cylindrical object. "Easy, Max," he murmured. The dog stayed perfectly still, breathing heavy, eyes fixed on the bag. Raymond reached forward, careful not to touch it yet. His fingertips hovered inches from the fabric. The mist condensed on his skin, cold and trembling. The bag wasn't dusty like everything else around it. Someone had placed it there recently. The straps were damp, but the metal teeth of the zipper still shone faintly. He exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. His voice came out almost as a whisper, more to himself than to anyone. This wasn't left behind. Max gave a low whine, stepping closer. The boy's voice echoed in his head. The man with the black coat. Raymond scanned the perimeter again. The trees loomed close, their dark shapes shifting with each gust of wind. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching through that veil of gray. He straightened, drawing his flashlight. The beam cut through the fog, hitting the duffel square. The reflection off the wires made his stomach twist. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just junk. He'd seen similar glints before, in war zones where one wrong touch could turn the world into fire. He stepped back, calling quietly over his shoulder. "Samuel." The boy didn't answer. When Raymond turned, the child was still there, sitting in the mud where he'd left him, wrapped in the oversized jacket. His eyes, huge and frightened, were locked not on the bag, but the trees behind Raymond, as though something stood there that only he could see. "Max," Raymond whispered. The dog pivoted toward the forest again, growl deepening, tail rigid. The wind shifted direction, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke, or maybe metal. It was impossible to tell. The forest, a moment ago silent, now seemed alive with sound. The drip of melting frost, the creak of branches, the rhythmic tick of the rails cooling behind them. Yet beneath it all, something else pulsed, a subtle vibration, like electricity crawling through the ground. Raymond crouched again, eyeing the bag, the wires glinting like veins beneath skin. His breath fogged in front of him. "Someone built this," he murmured. "Someone wanted it here." Max whined once more, stepping closer, then froze completely. His gaze followed something unseen, high among the treetops. Raymond looked up. Nothing. Only the slow drift of mist. But in that stillness, he swore he heard it again. The soft click of metal meeting metal, followed by a whisper of movement fading into the distance. Whoever had tied that boy, whoever had left this bag, they were close. Raymond stood, hand tightening around the grip of his weapon. The mist curled around him like a living thing. Behind him, Samuel's breath quickened, a quiet sob breaking the silence. Ahead, the forest swallowed the last trace of sound. And at Raymond's feet, the black duffel bag waited, its zipper half open, wires glinting in the pale morning light, like veins of something alive beneath the earth. He didn't need to open it to know. The morning's rescue had only peeled back the first layer of something far darker. The duffel sat like a wound in the earth, silent, glinting beneath the dim gray light. Raymond crouched low, one knee sinking into damp soil, his breath clouding the air in uneven bursts. His fingers trembled as he reached toward it. The bag wasn't random, not something lost, but something hidden, placed there with purpose. He could tell by the way the earth had been disturbed around it, the symmetry of the shallow depression, the way the leaves had been brushed carefully to disguise it. The zipper was half open, the metal teeth gleaming faintly through the mist. Inside, he caught the shape of a small metallic cylinder, the faint sheen of copper wire, and something that looked like a detonator cap. His pulse quickened, his chest tightening with the old, familiar dread that never really left a soldier who'd once dealt with explosives. Max let out a single sharp bark that cut through the quiet like a blade. Raymond froze, his instincts reacting faster than thought. "Easy," he muttered, pulling back. Max's bark wasn't curiosity, it was warning. The German shepherd's body was rigid, his ears tilted not toward the bag, but toward the tree line behind them. Raymond followed his gaze, slowly rising to his feet. The forest was a haze of pine and mist, the smell of a sap and cold earth thick in the air. Somewhere in that gray wall of trees, something moved. It wasn't the hesitant flutter of an animal. It was slow, measured, watching. Raymond's hand found the grip of his sidearm. The metal felt steady against his palm, an anchor in the storm rising inside his chest. His voice came out calm, though it carried the weight of every war he thought he'd left behind. "Show yourself." Nothing. Just wind sighing through branches. Then, the faint crunch of boots against frost. A man emerged from the mist. He looked like a fragment of the woods themselves, clothes torn, soaked, streaked with mud. His face was thin, almost hollowed by hunger and fear. He moved with a staggering weariness, hands half raised in surrender. His eyes, bloodshot and rimmed with exhaustion, darted between Raymond and the dog. "Don't shoot," the man rasped, his voice raw, barely human. "I didn't mean to hurt the boy." The words hung in the air like poison, spreading quiet through everything around them. Max's growl deepened, a guttural sound that vibrated through Raymond's bones. The stranger flinched at the sound but didn't move closer. Up close, his age was hard to tell. Maybe late 30s, maybe older. His face hidden behind a beard thick with grime. He smelled of sweat, iron, and fear. Raymond kept his weapon steady, eyes narrowing. "Step back," he ordered. The man obeyed, stumbling slightly as if his legs weren't his own. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," the man said again, voice shaking. "I only needed time." Raymond frowned. Time for what? The man looked at him, and for a moment, something like guilt flickered in his sunken eyes. "They're coming for me," he whispered. "I used the boy so they'd think I was still useful." The words didn't make sense. Not at first. Raymond took a slow breath, feeling his heartbeat steady. Behind him, Samuel whimpered softly, his small hand gripping Max's fur. The sound made the stranger's face twist, the shame suddenly too visible to hide. "You tied a child to a train track," Raymond said, his voice low and sharp as cold steel. "You call that useful?" The man's lips trembled, eyes darting back toward the trees. "If they find me," he said, voice cracking, "they'll kill everyone. You don't understand. It's not just me, it's bigger than—" He stopped, pressing his trembling hands against his temples, as if the words themselves were a sin to speak aloud. Raymond stepped forward cautiously, eyes locked on the man's every move. Max stayed between them, muscles tense, tail low, head tilted slightly to one side. "Ready." "Who are you?" Raymond asked. "What were you trying to do?" The man swallowed hard, his breath hitching. "I worked on the yard, the maintenance tunnels. They used us to move things, hide things. But I couldn't—" He broke off as a sound rippled through the woods. Faint, rhythmic, deliberate. The man's eyes widened. "It's them," he breathed. "You need to go." Raymond didn't lower his weapon. "Who?" "The ones who—" Max barked. Once, twice, 3 times. Short, sharp, precise. The universal signal. "We are not alone." Raymond turned, scanning the trees. The forest, moments ago empty, now felt alive with presence. Shadows between shadows. The subtle shift of weight. The murmur of movement just beyond sight. The stranger's face had gone pale as bone. "Please," he said, his voice barely more than breath. "If you want to save that boy, you'll leave me here." Raymond's jaw tightened. The soldier in him knew the tone. It was the sound of a man past redemption, someone already sentenced by his own choices. But he couldn't walk away. He stepped closer, weapon still trained, eyes never leaving the stranger's. "Who are they?" Raymond asked. "And what's in that bag?" The man opened his mouth to answer, but then stopped. His gaze flicked to the side, toward something unseen in the mist. His breath hitched. Then he whispered, "Too late." From the trees came a rustle, then silence. Raymond didn't move. Max stood perfectly still, ears flattened, tail rigid. The dog's eyes locked on the darkness, his body trembling with restrained instinct. The forest was holding its breath again, waiting for something neither man nor beast could name. Raymond exhaled slowly, the taste of metal on his tongue. His thoughts flickered to the duffel, to the boy, to the stranger's broken words. Nothing added up, but every piece felt like it belonged to something, terrible just beyond reach. And then the wind shifted again, carrying with it the faint smell of oil, sweat, and smoke. Whatever was out there was closer now, watching, listening. Raymond kept his voice low, steady. "Max," he murmured. The dog didn't look back. His growl deepened, that same deep, ancient rumble from before, the kind that made the hairs on the back of the neck rise. The stranger took one step backward into the fog, shoulders hunched. His mouth moved as if to say something more, but the words never came. The forest swallowed him whole, his shape dissolving into gray. Raymond raised his weapon again, scanning the direction he'd gone, but the man was gone. Only the soft crunch of receding footsteps echoed faintly through the trees. Then, silence again. Max turned his head slightly, eyes meeting Raymond's. They didn't need words. Both understood what the other was thinking. The boy hadn't been left there by accident. The man wasn't just running, and whatever was hunting him, it was already here. The forest began to move. Not in the way wind moves trees. This was deliberate, coordinated, a rhythm that belonged to boots, not branches. Raymond's pulse sharpened as the faint crunch of synchronized footsteps bled through the mist. Max stiffened, his body lowering instinctively, muscles coiled beneath his sable coat. The air was heavy with tension, thick enough to taste, carrying that metallic tang that always came before violence. From the pale haze ahead, 2 shadows formed, breaking through the curtain of fog with the steadiness of men who knew exactly what they were doing. Both wore black tactical jackets that swallowed the light, faces hidden behind carbon masks that distorted their breathing into mechanical rhythm. They stopped 10 paces away, close enough for Raymond to see the dull glint of a weapon slung low and the faint red glow blinking between gloved fingers. "Stay behind me," Raymond muttered to the boy, one hand reaching back to pull Samuel close against his leg. The child obeyed without a sound, pressing his face into the rough fabric of Raymond's jacket. Max's ears flattened. A deep growl rumbled through his chest, the sound vibrating like thunder caught in his throat. The taller of the two strangers lifted the device in his hand, a small black remote, no larger than a lighter, with a single pulsing light. His voice came through the mask, flat, controlled, the sound of a man who'd said these words before. "You should have stayed out of this, soldier." For a heartbeat, time collapsed into breath and heartbeat. The forest seemed to lean inward. Raymond's hand inched toward his holster, but he didn't draw. Not yet. He measured distance, counted angles, memorized how Max's body aligned between him and the blinking red light. The German shepherd stood like a wall of loyalty and bone, unflinching, his eyes fixed on the man's hand. Then the click came, a sound so small, yet it tore through the silence like a scream. The red light blinked once, then nothing. No explosion, no shockwave, just stillness. And in that single second of confusion, Max moved. The dog lunged, a flash of muscle and motion, his teeth locking around the man's arm with a force that cracked bone. The masked figure shouted, stumbling backward, the remote flying from his grip and skidding across the mud. The forest exploded with sound, gunfire tearing through the air, deafening cracks that sent birds bursting from the trees. Raymond dropped low, rolling behind a fallen log, pulling Samuel down with him. The second attacker advanced, rifle raised, muzzle flash strobing through the fog. Max didn't retreat. He pivoted, jaws dripping blood, and lunged again. The man fired, missed, the bullet carving bark inches from Raymond's shoulder. Raymond surged forward, slamming into the shooter, their bodies crashing into the mud. The struggle was chaos. Wet soil, splintered wood, breath against breath. The man was strong, trained, but Raymond fought with something beyond skill. The reflex of a man who'd survived too much to die here. His fist connected with the man's mask, cracking the visor. The attacker hit back, elbow driving into Raymond's ribs, pain bursting like lightning. Still, Raymond pressed in, forcing him down, the two rolling until the rifle slipped free and vanished into the dark. Meanwhile, Max tore at the first man's sleeve, dragging him to the ground. The dog's growls were primal, echoing across the pines. The man screamed, his weapon slipping from his hand, landing half-buried in wet leaves. And then, silence again. It came like a wave, swallowing everything. The forest stood still, smoke hanging low, the echo of gunfire fading into the hills. Both attackers lay on the ground, disarmed, heaving, their black masks cracked and smeared with mud. Raymond's breath came rough and fast. Max stood beside him, chest rising and falling, teeth bared but no longer biting. Samuel peeked out from behind the log, his small eyes wide, face streaked with dirt and tears. Raymond gave him a brief nod, wordless reassurance. Before turning back to the men, he leveled his pistol. "Talk." The shorter one groaned, clutching his shoulder. The taller, the one Max had torn through, spat blood into the mud. "You don't understand," he hissed, voice distorted through the broken mask. "The boy wasn't our plan." Raymond's aim didn't waver. "Then what the hell was it?" "He was leverage," the man said, grimacing. "Collateral. The engineer ran, took what we built. We were ordered to get him back." The other man coughed, dragging himself upright, the fabric of his jacket torn open to reveal the faint glint of a holster empty of its weapon. His voice came thin, weak. "He's out there, with the real one. The device you found. It was a decoy." Raymond's pulse slammed through his temples. A decoy for what? The shorter man's head lifted, his voice no longer defiant but almost pleading. "You think this is about a bomb? That's not what they wanted to hide. It's bigger than that. Deeper. The tunnels—" He stopped, choking as if the words burned his throat. The taller one snapped his gaze toward him, a warning flickering in the ruined half of his mask. "Shut up," he snarled. Raymond stepped closer, gun steady. "What's under the tracks?" Neither man answered, but it didn't matter. The silence told him enough. The pieces began to fall together in the dark corners of his mind. The boy, the duffel, the man in the black coat. And now this. An engineer gone rogue. A real device missing. Max moved beside him, ears twitching, scanning the mist for new movement. The forest had quieted again, but the air was no longer still. It pulsed. With tension, with danger, with the sense that this was far from over. Raymond's voice dropped, low and deliberate. "You're going to—" "Tell me where he went." The taller man laughed, a broken, humorless sound. "Even if I wanted to, he's gone. You'll never find him before it happens." Raymond pressed the muzzle to the man's shoulder. "Before what happens?" The man lifted his head slowly, eyes hollow behind the shattered mask. "Before the town learns what's really buried under those rails." Raymond's hand tightened. "What's buried?" But the man just smiled faintly, blood staining his teeth. "Preparation," he whispered. "That's all it ever was." And with that, his strength gave out. His head dropped forward, breathing shallow. Raymond stood still, gun lowering slowly as the meaning of that one word sank deep. Whatever this was, it wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't even revenge. It was preparation for something large enough to make the whole valley tremble. Max moved closer, pressing against Raymond's leg, silent but alert, eyes still scanning the mist where the first footsteps had come from. The forest was quiet again, but it was not peace. It was the pause before revelation. By nightfall, the rail yard had become a hive of lights and voices, the hum of engines and radios colliding with the whispering wind. Flashlights cut through the dark like search beams from another world, sweeping over the wrecked ground where daylight had once hidden its sins. The mist that had haunted the morning was gone, replaced by the acrid smell of diesel, metal, and fear. Officers moved carefully, boots splashing through puddles of rainwater and oil, their breath ghosting in the cold. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of a siren bled into the night, a lonely sound that made even the brave shift uneasily. Raymond stood in the middle of it all, his coat heavy with mud, his face drawn and pale under the harsh glow of the floodlights. His eyes, though exhausted, carried that steady, relentless calm of a man who had seen enough to know that the worst was never truly over. Max sat beside him, alert but silent, his fur still matted from the earlier struggle, breath steady but tense. The boy, Samuel, wrapped in a thick blanket from one of the first responders, sat a few feet away on a crate, clutching a metal cup of water with both hands, watching Raymond the way a lost soul watches a lighthouse. Near the old loading platform, 2 officers dragged a man forward, his wrists bound, his steps uneven, his face hollow from sleeplessness and shame. He was the engineer. Mid-40s, thin, with dark hair gone gray at the temples and grease embedded in every line of his skin. His clothes smelled of rust and smoke, His name tag, half torn, read only Marrow. The name suited him. There was something skeletal about him, as if guilt had been gnawing him from the inside out for years. They sat him down on the ground, his hands trembling. For a long time he said nothing. His eyes flicked from Raymond to the dog, then back again, like a man measuring how much truth he could afford to tell. Raymond crouched beside him, his tone even, not cruel. "You built it," he said. "So tell me what it's for." Marrow's lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes glistened in the artificial light, not with self-pity, but something far darker, recognition. "They wanted chaos," he whispered, voice brittle, every word pulled through wire. A chain reaction, signal failures, derailments, collisions. While everyone ran toward the wreckage, they'd move something else. Underneath. Raymond's jaw tightened. Move what? The man swallowed, shaking his head as if the word itself might tear him apart. Children. The night froze. Even the radios seemed to quiet for a breath. Raymond didn't move. His body went still, but his eyes burned. Where? Marrow looked down, tears carving through the grime on his cheeks. Under the yard. The tunnels. They used the maintenance shafts. I thought it was cargo at first. Then I saw the shoes. His voice cracked, splintering into a sound between a sob and a confession. I tried to stop it, but I was too late. When I ran, they made me build the decoys. They said they'd bury me under the same ground if I spoke. Max rose suddenly, muscles tight, head turning toward the tracks. His ears twitched and his nostrils flared. Then he pulled hard against the leash, barking once, not the frantic bark of aggression, but the sharp, purposeful one of recognition. Raymond followed his gaze. The dog's paw scraped at the dirt where the rail met the gravel, claws clinking against hidden metal. What is it, boy? Raymond murmured. But Max didn't stop. He began to dig, paws striking sparks as they hit something hard beneath the topsoil. Officers gathered, flashlights converging on the spot. Raymond dropped to one knee, brushing away layers of earth until the outline of something rusted appeared. An iron hatch, bolted and buried, its hinges eaten by time but still intact. A red tag hung from one corner, faded but legible. Yard maint. Access locked. Get me a crowbar, Raymond said. His voice was calm, but his heart thundered. Two men ran to fetch tools from the truck. Max paced in circles beside him, tail stiff, growling low. Samuel, drawn by the commotion, stood at the edge of the platform, his small face ghostly in the light. Is someone down there? He whispered. No one answered. When the crowbar came, Raymond wedged it under the hatch and pushed. The hinges screamed, rust flaking off in sheets, but it didn't budge. Again, he said, and two officers joined him. The metal groaned, protesting like an old secret forced into the open. Then, with one last heave, it cracked loose. A rush of air exploded upward, cold, foul, and ancient. It smelled of damp earth, oil, and something else. Something that made Raymond's stomach turn. He raised his flashlight and peered down. The beam vanished into darkness, swallowed by the deep. Ventilation shaft, one officer said quietly. Old maintenance tunnels, probably sealed off years ago. But Max wasn't waiting for theories. He leaned forward, nose quivering, then barked. Once, sharp, decisive. Raymond tied the leash to his belt and began to climb down the narrow metal ladder. Flashlight gripped in one hand, boots scraping against cold steel. The tunnel was narrow, lined with crumbling concrete and spiderwebs thick as rope. Water dripped from somewhere unseen. When his feet touched the bottom, He felt it, a faint draft of cold air moving through the tunnel, carrying a smell like old iron and fear. He swept his light ahead. The tunnel bent sharply to the left, ending in a small chamber lined with wooden crates and rusted rails. In the far corner, behind a stack of pipes, something flickered, the glint of eyes. He froze. "It's okay," he said softly, raising his free hand. "You're safe now." The light caught movement. Small faces, pale and dirt-streaked, emerged from the shadows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Children, their eyes wide and glassy, their hands clutching each other's sleeves. One was no older than Samuel. Another wore a yellow raincoat torn at the sleeve. They didn't speak. They just stared. Raymond's chest tightened. His voice broke into a whisper. God. He heard footsteps above, the others gathering. "They're here," he called. Max barked again, once, deep, triumphant, the kind of sound that carried both command and joy. It echoed through the tunnel, filling it like a promise. When the first officer's flashlight appeared from above, the children flinched, shielding their faces. Raymond knelt, setting down the light, holding out his hand. "It's all right," he said. "We're not going to hurt you." The smallest girl stepped forward first, trembling, her hand reaching toward him with hesitant faith. He caught it gently, lifting her into his arms. Tears burned behind his eyes. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice catching. "You're going home." One by one, they were lifted out of the dark. Samuel stood beside Max, eyes wide, watching every movement. When Raymond climbed back up last, his arms aching, his face streaked with grime and tears, the boy threw his arms around him, clutching his leg. "You came back," he whispered. Raymond knelt, pressing his palm gently to the child's hair, his voice low and certain. "No one gets left under the rails," he said. Max sat beside them, tail brushing the dirt, eyes calm and knowing. Above, the first light of dawn began to push against the night, faint but growing. The darkness was lifting, not all at once, but enough. Enough for hope to find its way back. Dawn arrived quietly, a pale hush spreading across the horizon, as if the sky itself wanted to whisper rather than wake. The first rays of light bled through the low clouds, turning the mist into drifting silver veils that shimmered over the yard. The chaos of the night before had faded into a fragile calm. Flashing emergency lights still blinked red and blue against the soft gray morning, but now their glow felt gentler, like the heartbeat of a world that had survived. The ground, slick with rain and soot, glistened beneath the slow crawl of dawn, and every breath hung in the cold air like a prayer finally exhaled. Parents had begun to gather near the cordoned area, their faces pale and hollowed from sleepless nights. When the officers led the rescued children out, one by one, small figures wrapped in blankets and trembling from both cold and disbelief, the sound that broke through the quiet wasn't chaos or fear. It was relief. Mothers fell to their knees, clutching sons and daughters as if they'd never let go again. Fathers stood frozen, hands over their mouths, tears cutting through grime and exhaustion. Words became meaningless in the flood of sobs and laughter, and even the toughest officers turned away for a moment, wiping their eyes in silence. Raymond stood at the edge of the platform, watching it all unfold beneath the thinning fog. His uniform was stiff with dried mud, and his breath still carried the metallic taste of adrenaline. Yet in his chest, something softer stirred, a gratitude too deep for words. Max sat beside him, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. The German shepherd's fur caught the pale light like polished bronze, the scars of the night glinting faintly beneath his coat. He had saved lives before, but this felt different. This was not a victory of training or instinct. It was mercy. Samuel spotted them from across the yard. The boy's blanket dragged along the ground as he ran, his bare feet pattering softly against the cold concrete. When he reached them, he stumbled, caught himself, and then leaned against Max, wrapping both arms around the dog's neck. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice trembling with the weight of what it meant. Max didn't move for a second, as if he were listening. Then, slowly, he lowered his head, pressing his muzzle against the boy's chest, and his tail thumped once against the ground, soft, steady, certain. Raymond smiled faintly, a small crack of warmth breaking through his tired features. "He always finds what others can't see," he said, voice low and full of reverence. The boy looked up, his pale eyes clearer now, though still shadowed by everything he'd seen. "Can I stay with him?" he asked quietly. Raymond's answer came without hesitation. "For now, I think he'd like that." Samuel sat beside them, small fingers buried in Max's fur, the world around them fading into the hum of engines, the murmurs of relief, and the first distant whistle of the trains returning to motion. As morning grew, the yard transformed. The wreckage was cleared, rail workers moved like ghosts through the mist, and the tracks, once symbols of terror, now gleamed under the rising sun. When the trains began to move again, their long, echoing whistles rolled through the valley, no longer carrying the sound of warning. Instead, they sounded like hymns, notes of forgiveness and faith carried on iron and wind. Officers finished their reports. Statements were taken, photos logged, names written down with trembling pens. Yet no report could capture the fullness of what had happened, the fragile beauty of those few hours when darkness and light had stood so close that they almost became the same thing. When the paperwork reached the town office weeks later, someone, no one remembered who, typed a name for the file: The Red Hollow Rescue. The title stuck. The newspapers printed it. The news anchors said it with voices heavy with awe. But for Raymond, it was never just a rescue. It was something sacred. Proof that mercy could wear fur, that redemption could arrive on 4 silent paws, and that faith wasn't always found in cathedrals, but sometimes in the soft exhale of a dog who refused to give up. By noon, most of the officers had left. The crowd thinned. Parents and children were escorted home, wrapped in the arms of safety they thought they'd lost. Only Raymond, Max, and Samuel remained near the edge of the tracks, where the rails curved toward the open valley. The air smelled of cold metal and pine sap, and the light had turned golden. Raymond sat down slowly on an old bench, every muscle aching, and Max curled at his feet, eyes half closed, content but vigilant. Samuel climbed up beside him, holding the dog's paw between his small hands, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Raymond looked at the boy, then at the horizon where the sky had begun to burn with morning gold. "You're safe now," he said softly. "That's what matters." The boy nodded, his head resting against Max's side. "Do you think the bad men will come back?" he asked. Raymond's eyes narrowed slightly at the faraway line of trees where the fog had swallowed the last traces of night. "Not here," he said. "Not while we're watching." He looked down at Max, whose ears twitched at the sound of a distant train horn. The dog's gaze met his, a silent understanding. the kind that only exists between souls who have walked through fire together. The sun climbed higher, scattering light across the tracks. Steam rose from the rails, curling upward like ghosts freed from the ground. For the first time in days, Raymond let himself breathe deeply, letting the warmth of the new day fill his lungs. The cold, the fear, the chaos, all of it receded like a tide. What remained was stillness, and in that stillness, something holy. As the trains rumbled by again, their whistles stretched across the valley, echoing off the hills. They no longer sounded like warnings. They sounded like hymns. And there, beside the rails that had nearly taken lives, two figures sat in silence, a man and his dog, the living proof of what devotion looks like when it refuses to die. The world didn't know their names, not truly. But the wind carried them anyway, whispering through the pines, folding their story into the soil of Red Hollow. Because sometimes, mercy doesn't speak, it breathes. And sometimes, it wears fur. Some stories don't end when the mission does. They linger, in the breath between heartbeats, in the silence after danger has passed. Because courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks on four paws, waiting patiently in the shadows. Sometimes it stands beside us, steady and unspoken, reminding us that loyalty needs no words at all. What we witnessed here wasn't about heroes in uniform or medals on a wall. It was about the quiet kind of bravery, the kind that lives in those who keep showing up, even when the world isn't watching. It was about kindness that expects nothing back, and the fragile, stubborn hope that still burns in those who refuse to give up on what's good. If you listen closely, maybe you can still hear it. The steady rhythm of trust, the heartbeat of a friend who would walk through fire for you. So tonight, let's carry that silence with us. Let's remember that in a world that sometimes forgets how to care, there are still those who remember, still those who guard the light, softly, faithfully, endlessly. And somewhere, out there in the dark, a loyal soul is still keeping watch.